From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
We are all here to hear from Patrik Henry Bass and Jerry Craft. Let me tell you a bit about Patrik first. Patrik with no C, that would be a K. He is an award-winning author and writer and editor, and when he is not penning bestsellers, he's reading what we should all be reading and telling us what to read as the book's editor for Essence magazine. And he also wrote a fantastic book called Like a Mighty Stream, The March on Washington, August 28, 1963. But today, we're going to hear him talk about something different, his first children's book. And it's got a fantastic title. It's called The 0 Degree Zombie Zone. Anybody got an idea about what a 0 degree zombie zone might be? Are you fascinated about the title? Yeah, me too. This book is an action-packed adventure about an African-American boy hero and his classmates. So if you're in the 3rd grade to 7th grade, do we have any 3rd or 7th graders or 4th graders or 5th graders out here? Raise your hand. This might be a fantastic book for you. But the book wouldn't be in your hand if it wasn't illustrated too. So I get to tell you about the fantastic illustrator as well. His name is Jerry Craft, and he's a graduate of the School of Visual Arts in New York. He's been illustrating and publishing books since 1997. That's before many of you guys were even a thought. And he also has a syndicated comic strip called Mama's Boys. So without any further ado, I'm going to give this podium over to two fantastic, immensely talented gentlemen. First, Patrik Henry Bass, and then Jerry Craft. Can we give them a warm welcome?
Thank you all for being here. You have so many selections of authors and activities, and it means the world to Jerry and I that you're here with us to hear about the 0 Degree Zombie Zone, which was just published on Tuesday. And here you guys are early adopters. We love it, you know, our trailblazers and our ambassadors. I have 10 minutes to talk, and I just want to let you know that the last place in the world I ever imagined I would be on this stage talking about the 0 Degree Zombie Zone, but how glad I am. When I was first asked by Scholastic to do this book about 6 years ago, I asked the editor what grade was she thinking of for me to reach, and she said, what about 4th graders? And I just panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, that was the worst year of my life, the 4th grade. I mean, I wish she would have said 3rd grade or 5th grade, but the 4th grade was just disastrous. There were a couple of things happening in the culture, and I was thinking, I hope she's not going to ask me to write what I know. And of course, she cleared her throat and said, why don't you just write what you know? And from the bottom of my heart, I'm telling you, what I knew then growing up in Lawrenceburg, North Carolina, was that there was a Soviet missile crisis that my grandparents talked about every day, and they involved me intensely in those conversations, both at breakfast and at dinner. So I was afraid when I would go to school that there would be a bomb that would be dropped on me. There was a film called Close Encounters of the Third Kind, in which I kept thinking that I was going to be kidnapped at any moment, that I was going to be in Utah or somewhere in the mountains, and people would point their fingers up in the air. And then, I kid you not, there was a psychic on television who wore a fur cap in August, who went on a television show and predicted that there would be a cataclysmic earthquake that would begin in Miami, and this earthquake would end in Lawrenceburg, North Carolina, where I grew up. And so I thought, all of that anxiety and neuroses that I was feeling, if I wrote what I knew, no one would believe me. So I came upon the 0 Degree Zombie Zone. It was just a safer bet for me to write about zombies because what I'd known was so scary and terrifying. And when I went back and looked at my 4th grade self, as skinny as I was, believe it or not, I had hair back then, believe it or not, I just remember the feeling that I would get when I would go into other narratives, when I would go into other worlds, the fun and the fantasy of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I didn't know Oompa Loompa Land, Veruca Salt, all of these people, they were just mysterious people to me, but I remember entering into that world, and once I was transported into that world, I was on a journey that I would never forget. I didn't get to see the movie, but I went along for that ride, and I remember what that ride did for me. So when the opportunity came about to create a narrative, I just first wanted children to remember to use their imagination and for children to have fun. And so when you meet Bakari Katari Johnson, and you meet Keisha Owens, and you meet Tariq Thomas, and when you meet Wardell Washburn, these kids who go to Thurgood Cleavon Wilson Elementary School, in one single day, the extraordinary that kind of happened to me every day, in which my parents would talk about that bomb and the finger on the bomb, and when they would talk about that possible earthquake, all of that anxiety is bottled up in little Bakari, and he has to summon within himself some power. And the way that he finds that power, when you go on the ride, when you go on this adventure with Bakari Katari Johnson, you'll see human emotion, but you'll also see zombie tales in a way that they haven't been told before, which Jerry has done brilliantly in terms of his illustrations. And more importantly, it really is about the emotions of the kids. And it really is about reluctant readers, getting kids who are more comfortable with video games. And I had Atari, so between Atari and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory won all the time. But these days, the video games, which are important, an extension of fun, but to get kids, especially reluctant readers, especially boys, back into the practice, into the art of reading, going on journeys, not in a preachy way, not in a hagiographic way, not in an earnest way, but in a very, very honest way, was very, very important to the narrative. And so we have a colorful world, we have a marble. Who remembers marbles? Okay. No one under 50. We have marbles, we have hall monitors, we have a grandfather, and that is my nod to the wonderful work of writers like Virginia Hamilton and Walter Dean Myers, who were the grandfather and grandmother of it all. There's so many wonderful books being published. What Jerry and I were just trying to do was to fill the fantasy category with a different take, with a different spin, with all the universal themes of fun, fantasy, friendship, family, and finding one's own voice. And Ms. Taylor, am I doing okay for my time? What am I doing in my time right now? Because I'm a Capricorn and very specific. Okay, so, okay. And so what's also important for you to know is that our hashtag is hashtag 0 Degree Zombie Zone. It's not the 0 Degree Zombie Zone, but hashtag 0 Degree Zombie Zone to spread the message, spread the word, to just watch the mirth, the pleasure, the fun the kids are going to have when they go along for this journey. And Jerry and I will be more than happy to answer questions at the last part of this conversation and when we sign books upstairs. And now I present to you the immensely talented and gifted illustrator for the 0 Degree Zombie Zone, Mr. Jerry Craft.
Thank you. I got a wire. Hey everyone, thank you for having me. So how many of you kids like to draw? Okay. Now, when Patrick was talking about reluctant readers, there was no reader as reluctant as I was as a kid. I read Marvel comics, and that was about it. But you know, with that, you know, I built up a nice vocabulary with different things. And one of the things that I've always liked to do was to draw. So even though I did pretty well in school, you know, but when I got my homework back, I'd draw superheroes up and down the margins of the test and things like that. So I just always liked to draw. So one of the things that I did as I got older is I was fortunate enough to be able to draw for a living. So what I do is I normally sketch out my drawings with a blue pencil. And then with Bakari, he has a nice rounded kind of face. So I'm going to do a quick sketch of him. Okay. So what I do with Bakari is he has, one of the important things is with talking with Patrick and the editors there, is they talk about the features. So I do lots and lots of different sketches. I have a whole album full of different sketches of different things that they had. And I have two sons, And when I got the script for it, the first thing I do is I read it over and over again. So now as an adult, I actually do enjoy reading, which is why I love working on books, because I try to encourage you guys to read. So I'll go over and over again. I'll read the story, I'll read it again, I'll jot down any little details, I'll talk to the editors, and then I send a bunch of different sketches, and then as it gets closer, then I kind of hone it a little bit more each time. So with Bakari, one of the things is that I have his head. I'm going to do this quickly. Okay, I get the shape of his head. I start nice and easy. I do big circles like this, and he's got his ear coming in. And then the eyes are always very important. So I would come in, and I always put like a little opening in the eye, a little highlight. I always like the way that looked. And this is from literally doing stuff thousands of times. Okay, I couldn't always draw like this. Okay, I used to start by tracing my Spider-Man comic book, or Silver Surfer, or something like that, Fantastic Four comic books. And then because he is very happy right now, because he's an ordinary kid that has to do something extraordinary, extraordinary adventure. So I want to have him looking like he's standing up to the occasion and being brave. So the expression on his face really matters. I want to have him smiling. So all of these, as you see, are just little dashes and dots and things that you can do, but once you put them all together, it really makes a big difference. Now, one of the other things that was so important is, in addition to, like, once I got it, you know, I have two sons who are now teenagers, and I always show them the scripts to get their opinion on it. And once they gave it the thumbs up, then the idea of working with Scholastic and with Patrik was really like getting an invitation to join the dream team. Okay? So the other thing that is important is sometimes it's good to actually draw from pictures. Okay? Now, being that I have two sons, sometimes I actually make them, sometimes against their will, dress up, you know, and get in these poses. So for this one, you know, I had to pick on my younger son, Aaron. And I said, okay, Aaron, so here's your motivation. Okay, so, you know, let's get you some jeans. I want you in the sneakers now. So your feet are frozen to the ground because the zombies, the 0-degree zombies, you know, the ice zombies, they have frozen your feet, so you're straight like that. All right, let's get to, I like the little hooded sweatshirt. That's kind of cool. So pretend like you're shooting lightning out of this hand and out of this hand, but your feet are frozen. He's like, ah, you know, again, I'm like, yeah, hey, this is what puts the food in our mouths. All right. All right, so then one of the important things is that he has glasses. So I'm giving not really the cooler ones, but more thicker like that, because he's not necessarily a fashion plate. That's not his deal. So it's starting to shape up a little bit. And then the eyebrows also add so much to the expression. So his eyebrows are coming down like that. And then once I do it, then I start to put the hair in. And, you know, I look at the different features. You know, it's really important to get the ears a certain way, the nose a certain way, and then the hair, I start to shape his head. And then I always put like a little highlight, a little shine on the hair. And as I get it right, I start to shade it in a little bit more. And now comes the pose. And this is where I had to thank my son for that. So even though he probably had to stay there a little longer than he wanted to, but get the hands in here. And this is the one that is coming forward at you. Start to put a little shading in there. And then little by little, the pose starts to happen. And then I want to make it very exciting to match Patrik's story. So a lot of it is really a lot of movement, this kind of thing coming. The fabric is actually very important to the excitement of the story. I like the hooded sweatshirt because it has the little ties that can go swinging everywhere. And then the leg starts to come out. And then this leg is coming towards you. So again, all of these are very easy lines like this, but once you start putting them together, so just a very basic kind of thing, but once you get it together, it all kinds of adds up. And then this arm is coming this way. And we tried different poses, and I'm clicking away with my you know, my camera, and my son's like, listen, I haven't played Xbox in a couple hours. Can I get back to that, please? And get the hands in like this. And then one of the things that I like from my Marvel comics is one of my favorite ones was the Silver Surfer. And he used to be in space all the time, so he had the cosmic energy coming out of his hands. So I kind of wanted to do something like that. So I had it where he had this coming around, and he's got the marble in this hand that Patrick told you about, and it's radiating from here, and then it goes behind the head like that. So it's really starting to kind of bring in a whole thing. And I might have done probably 5 or 6 different versions of this to send back and forth to the editor and the art director. I think in one of them I had the kids in the background being sucked up into the zombie portal, and they said, no, let's try something different, try different colors in the background, and then I will bring this around and then just connect it. And then before you know it, it's starting to actually really take shape. And then I had the characters in the background, but then also, as I said, his feet are frozen in ice to the ground. So then you have the ice coming up, so you want to make that very pointy like this coming out. And then what I do is I draw all of my pictures like this, pencil and paper, and then I ink over it, and then I scan it into my computer. So all the coloring I do is in a program called Adobe Photoshop. And from there, I can use all kinds of filters and highlights and things like that. And then I kind of bring that out like this. I can make parts a bit lighter. I gave them some cool sneakers, because I want kids that are looking at, you know, my sons are into sneakers, so I wanted something that's also relatable. Okay. And then you start to put in little shadows here and there and darken certain areas. And then before you know it, the last thing I'll do is start to putting the highlights and what's darker and lighter. And before you know it, this is one of those things that, you know, my dream of when I was back in 4th or 5th grade of wanting to do books or something like that ends up into something like this. And then for the inside, what happens is working again with the art director, they tell me exactly how many photos they want, how many illustrations, and then those are black and white. So I get to develop the zombie, which is actually kind of a fun thing. And I wanted this to be a little different, so it's not the Walking Dead zombies, that kind of thing. So this is more of a, you know, they're ice zombies. So this is a frozen thing. So let me take this off real quick. All right, so with him, they're definitely more angular. So I had the face coming out more like this, and this is the chin. So I'm always coming out with larger shapes first before I really go into any detail. And then everything with these guys is very pointed. You know, the noses are pointed, you know, the features, because as, you know, if you talk about them being made of ice, okay? And then the eyes, very sharp like that. So everything kind of matches. And then for the hair, obviously I'm going to keep that and have it almost like icicles. And then this guy starts to shape up a little bit too. He's got kind of a little funky ice dew. That. And then he's got that. And I'll put a little bit of shadow under there to bring that up. And then little things that you can add to make it look like ice, some of these shading, like this. And then, to make him look just a little more fierce, he's got a couple of points on these shoulders like that. And then obviously, because there is lots of ice, he's got, it's always snowing because it's cold. You may have some of the frost coming out of their mouth, that kind of thing. And then the ice place in general always has this kind of stuff in the back.
So Jerry will be doing face painting upstairs.
Yes.
So we have about 8 minutes for question and answers before we sign. That was brilliant, Jerry Kraft. Jerry Kraft. So we have about 8 minutes for questions and answers. There are microphones in each aisle. If anyone has a question, your name and your question. We love statements and comments, but right now, and manifestos. But right now, we just would like to keep it to one question.
Is this a comic book?
No, it's a novel. Dang, 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 it's not a comic book. Dang.
Yes,
it has illustrations.
When did you start drawing?
When I started drawing, from the time that I was old enough to hold a crayon and not actually eat it anymore. So 5, I mean, it's a passion. So I've always loved to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm a little older than the elementary crowd, but I'm a mom, and I wanted to say that when my son was young, there were very few books with African-American male characters doing things other than playing basketball. So I'm really glad to see this book, and I just commend you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How many pages does it have?
1,000 pages.
How long have you been drawing?
About 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Patrik, tell the kids here how long it took you to write the book so that they understand that you have to really have some patience and determination to write a book and to publish it.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. This was a 6-year process, and so just for some behind-the-scenes exclusive content that you can all share on YouTube. The children originally went to Pluto, the planet Pluto, in one day, and my editor was like, I don't know if that can happen. I'm like, it's a kid's book. like, why can't it happen? And that was about 1.5 years. And then the next 1.5 years, I took the kids to Hades. And I know that Tony Abbott has the whole Underworld series, but you know, the Greeks did it millions of years ago. So I'm like, okay, let's see what can happen if Tariq Bakari, Keisha, and Wardell go. They put the coins on the little three-eyed dog's tongue, and let's sort of see what happens. And then my editor talked about copyright issues, and I was wondering whether we were being sued by Edith Hamilton's estate or Zeus. So I decided to abandon that. And then the zombies just sort of came to me, thinking about the fear and the terror. But all along, Leslie, I had to keep the focus on the kids and the emotion and the goal of the friendship and them finding their own voice. But thank you for that question.
Okay, go ahead. How many books have you written?
Jerry, how many books have you done?
I've done maybe about 15 different books.
And this is my 3rd book, first children to nonfiction.
Just wanted to build on what this lovely lady said and see if you could say something about how, if you want to be a writer, how important it can be to be a reader and the diversity of the kinds of things you might have read. And
oh, absolutely. I had no talent growing up in Lawrenceburg, North Carolina. I just had the misfortune of being born into a family with the best singer, the best basketball player, the best everything. And I was always like the first runner-up, or not exactly the last one called, but quite close to the last one called. But what I could do was read. And that was my gift. And so reading opened up an entire world of possibility for me. And I think it's very, very important for people not to be restricted to what makes them feel comfortable. I've learned so much about the French through Balzac as I've gotten older. I've learned so much about the Russians through Dostoevsky, but it's very universal. So I never felt that those worlds were forbidden to me, because in the end, they're really people battling against extraordinary situations and consequences, normally based on their own decisions. So I encourage people to go into worlds different than ones of their own. I think a book that transformed me forever was Gabriel Garcia Marquez's Love in the Time of Cholera. I never would have thought that me from North Carolina could have related to this narrative, and I find it one of my personal narratives that I feel the closest to. So thank you. Take a chance on literature, and also with children's books, what we're trying to do is to not bring back the fantasy, but to encourage people to have imagination and fantasy and fun and that mirth-like, childlike sense of adventure, that we never should lose sight of that, not only for kids who are 8 to 12, but also those kids who are young at heart.
What made you want to draw the book, or, write the book?
Write the book, the opportunity presented itself to me, and I thought it was an opportunity to fill a void, and I couldn't say no to that. I could think of there was no way I could say no to the opportunity to put another book on a library shelf that could possibly impact somebody's life.
And to see this little guy here shaking the book up and smiling that's about as good as it can be. This guy right here.
Yes.
Right there. Go ahead. Don't be embarrassed now. Go ahead.
Okay.
I hope you gentlemen are already planning sequels.
There's a second Zero Degree Zombie Zone in the works, so yes. So I think, Leslie, we have another task. Is that to go upstairs to do something? We're going to the zombie zone upstairs. Is that where we're going with the zombies? We'll be signing books upstairs. You all have been much, much more than we could have ever hoped for or expected. Thank you for your time and your patience, and hashtag 0 Degree Zombie Zone, and a fantastic Labor Day weekend to you all.
Yep, thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.